Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings. Now let's get straight into it. Now, today we're diving back into Daniel chapter 11, or starting at verse 10 this time. That's where we left off last time. And most of this portion or this part of the lesson will be covering one known as Antiochus III. All right, because Daniel chapter 11 is mainly referring to his exploits and, of course, some of the King of the South's exploits at the time that he was in rulership too as well. But Antiochus III, for about the next 9 verses, it's all referring to Antiochus III. So we're going to talk about him and some of his exploits and get some of the history here and even tie in some of the scriptures too, of course, as well. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump on in. I do have the notes like I did the last part. And let's jump straight on in. Like I said last time too, with these notes, I will make this available after the end of this chapter of this lesson. When we finish all parts and get down to the end, I will make this available in the description. So let's get in here. Now, this is Daniel chapter 11 and verse 10. It says, "But his son shall be stirred up and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress." So this is referring to Antiochus III, the one that shall come, at least the one shall certainly come and overflow. But when it says, "but his son shall be stirred up," it's referring to Seleucus II, his sons, which is Seleucus III, Antiochus III. Okay, so Seleucus III, Caranus, all right, Caranus, Seleucus III, Soter, called Seleucus Caranus, ruled from December 225 BC to April or June 2000. I keep saying 2000, yo. December 225 BC to June 223 BC, all right, was a ruler from the Hellenistic Seleucid kingdom, the eldest son of Seleucus II, Callinicus, and Laodicea II. All right, so this cat, he didn't rule that long. He actually was poisoned and killed in his reign of less than 2 years there. And, that's why he's mainly not covered here. He actually didn't rule that long. Again, eldest son of Seleucus II, which we talked about in the last installment here, Laodicea II. Not much to really discuss there. Soter in Greek means savior, and Caranus means thunderbolt. But yeah, this cat didn't rule that long. But those are, that's one of the sons that shall be stirred up. And stirred up meaning they did seek to finish their father's war with Egypt, or the Ptolemies. Okay. So Seleucus III, Antiochus III, that's the other son. They were brothers, Seleucus III and Antiochus III. And shall assemble a multitude of great forces. So we have in the notes here, shall assemble a multitude of great forces. That's the Fourth Syrian War, to take back possessions. So let's look at the Fourth Syrian War here. Let's get it. All right, so let's see. Fourth Syrian War, it says, upon taking the Seleucid throne in 223 BC, Antiochus III the Great set himself the task of restoring the possessions of Seleucus I Nicator, which extended from Greco-Bactrian kingdom in the east, the Hellespont in the north, and Syria in the south. All right, by 221 BC, he had reestablished Seleucid control over Media and Persia, which had been in rebellion. The ambitious king turned his eyes towards Syria and Egypt. All right, so this is kicking off the Fourth Syrian War. And remember, the Syrian wars are essentially the wars over Syria, Cilicia, or the wars between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, which are just the Greek Edomites that ruled over these countries or these areas at this time. All right. And we know that the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, they sprang forth from Alexander the Great, quote unquote great, after he died. Okay. So now we're down to the Fourth Syrian War, because there were many. I believe there were 6 in total. Yeah, pretty much 6 Syrian wars. So we at the 4th one at this point. And it really culminated with the Battle of Raphia, which we're about to talk about here in a second. Okay. And the Battle of Raphia, by the way, ended with the Ptolemies winning. Ptolemy the Fourth, he ended up winning that war or that battle, and thus winning the Fourth Syrian War. But we're about to get that in just a second. Let's go. All right. It says, shall be stirred up, shall assemble a multitude of great forces. That's the Fourth Syrian War, to take back possessions from their forefather, Seleucus I, Nicator. One shall certainly come. Antiochus III, he was the one since Seleucus died after only a 2-year reign. That's what we went over. Again, he was poison, yo. He was poison. And overflowing passed through. So Antiochus III is passing through Syria with a multitude. All right, then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. So he returned back to Antioch after the defeat of Raphia. All right, so let's get a little bit more on that. All right. Now, one thing here, I want you to take a look at this book here. Let's get the title. So the title of this book is The Old and New Testament Connected, in the History of the Jews and Neighboring Nations, from the Declension of the Kingdoms of Israel and Judah to the Time of Christ, Volume 2 by Humphrey Prideaux. Now, Humphrey Prideaux here, he wrote about all of the history, or not all, but he wrote about a lot of the history within the 3rd century or so, all the way up into the time of Christ. So a lot of the wars that were going on. And by the way, speaking of that, we're reading about here in the scriptures in Daniel chapter 11 of the Ptolemaic kingdom and the Seleucid kingdom, having the Syrian wars and things of that nature. But we're about to see here soon that Rome was also on the rise at this time too as well. So you got the Punic Wars kicking off over there. All right, with Hannibal, which was a so-called black man, by the way. Hannibal on the Punic side, or the quote-unquote Phoenicians, which are really just Israelites and Canaanites mixed together. All right, and then also you had different areas too as well, like Parthia and things of that nature, where and the Macedonians too. You had the Macedonian wars going on between Rome and Macedon. So you had other things going on, but here in this book here, it's a collection of a lot of the history there. So it's definitely something to check out. You can read it for free here online. You can download a PDF. Let me do that real quick. Yeah, let me do that myself here. Yeah, so you can go straight to it. If you want to look at some of the history and where I pulled a lot of the resources from this lesson today, and really everything involving, the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid kingdoms. So yeah, for sure. Definitely check this out. Now, it is a harder read. It is pretty long. There's a lot going on there if you're newer to this history, but it's definitely worth checking out just to kind of fact check everything that, that you see here in Daniel chapter 11, because we know the scriptures are 100% accurate, and everything that went down here in Daniel chapter 11 that was written, that was given to Daniel from the angel. All right. It came to pass just the way that the Most High said that it would. All right. So it's truly remarkable just to see, history given hundreds of years before the time that it comes to pass and actually does just that. All right. But yeah, back to verse 10 here. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. So he actually lost Antiochus III. He lost that first battle against Ptolemy the Fourth. Okay. Now let's go to both of them too as well. All right. You got Antiochus the Third, the Great. Antiochus, the Greek Hellenistic king and the sixth ruler of the Seleucid Empire, reigning from 222 to 187 BC. He ruled over the region of Syria and large parts of the rest of Western Asia towards the end of the 3rd century BC, rising to the throne at the age of 18 and y'all, why I keep wanting to say 2022 or something, Mike? 18 and 222 BC, his earlier campaigns against the Ptolemaic kingdom were unsuccessful. So this is referring to the Battle of Raphia. We're about to go into in a second. But in the following years, Antiochus gained several military victories and substantially expanded the empire's territory. His traditional designation, the Great, reflects an epithet he assumed. He also assumed the title Basilis Megas, Greek for Great King, the traditional title of the Persian kings. A military active ruler, Antiochus restored much of the territory of the Seleucid Empire before suffering a serious setback towards the end of his reign in his war against Rome. Declaring himself the champion of Greek freedom against Roman domination, Antiochus III waged a 4-year war against the Roman Republic, beginning in mainland Greece in the autumn of 192 BC, before being decisively defeated at the Battle of Magnesia. He died 3 years later on the campaign in the east. So a lot of this is actually mentioned in Daniel chapter 11, towards like the 18th or so verse. We're going to get down there. So this is this joker here, Antiochus III, at least the alleged little bust here. But we know how that works. All right. So yeah, we could keep going here, but I want to stick to what's covered here in the scriptures. And there's going to be a lot of things I don't actually mention that I'm privy to, because I am trying to stick to the scriptures as closely as possible. But, you know, for brothers and sisters that want even more history or want even more insight of, you know, the historical aspects of the Syrian wars and the Seleucid Empire, the Ptolemaic Empire, so on and so forth. That's why I pull up a lot of these links, so brothers and sisters can look these things up on their own too as well. All right, so yeah, so after his defeat, he returned back to Antioch, and that history is here in Old and New Testament connected. Okay, got this pulled back up. Now let's go to the next verse here. Let's get Daniel chapter 11, verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given unto his hand. So the king of the south here is referring to no other than Ptolemy the Fourth, Philopater. So Ptolemy the Fourth, Philopater. It says Ptolemy the fourth, Philopater, lover of his father. And this cat was nasty, man. We about to see here soon. He had a lot going on, all manners of fornication. Okay, the dude was a pedophile. He was into incest. He married his sister, but that was actually common in the Ptolemaic kings. Most of them, if not almost all of them, married their sister, so they were really into that. But one thing about this that I want y'all to understand is that they weren't just marrying a sister just because they freaks. That's obvious. All right, but it's a deeper meaning to it. They were actually following the customs of the Egyptian gods before them, because in Kemet, this is the exact practices that they were doing as well. Okay, if we look up, like, Osiris or the different pagan deities that the Egyptians worshiped, Um, most of them actually married either their mother or their sister. Okay, in the mythos of it, these aren't actual gods that ever lived, but in the gods that they worship, or on the left hand side, those energies that they worship actually married either their mother or their sister. So I'm tying that to today when you know what, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. Ptolemy the Fourth was the son of Ptolemy the Third and Berenice the Second. His succession to the throne was accompanied by a wide-ranging purge of the Ptolemaic royal family, which left control of the realm's government largely in the hands of his courtiers, Sosibius and Agathocles. His reign was marked by the Fourth Syrian War with the Seleucid Empire, which culminated in a decisive Ptolemaic victory at the Battle of Raphia, one of the largest battles in the whole Hellenistic age. In the final years of his rule, control over the southern portion of the country was lost to the rebel pharaoh Ugranifer. Ptolemy IV died in mysterious circumstances in 204 BC and was succeeded by his young son, Ptolemy V Epiphanes, under the regency of Sosibius and Agathocles. So not to be confused with Antiochus IV Epiphanes, which is mentioned in First Maccabees chapter 1, which I want to go to that really quickly here too. Let's go to First Maccabees chapter 1 in verse 10. It says, "And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year in the kingdom of the Greeks." So the highlighted portion here, Antiochus the king, that's Antiochus the third. So Antiochus Epiphanes, the man that terrorized Israel that we read about in First Maccabees, Antiochus the third was his father. Okay, so yeah, of course he was wicked too, but we're gonna get more. We're gonna get more. All right, so now we back here in the scriptures. We read a little bit on Ptolemy the Fourth. We're gonna get more on him. We read a little bit about Antiochus the third, but let's see where this connects with the scriptures at. All right, verse 12. It says, "And when he hath taken away the multitude," let's go back to verse 11. "And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand." So the king of the south is referring to Ptolemy the Fourth. Okay. Philopater. "And shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north," is Antiochus the third at the Battle of Raphia. So let's get the Battle of Raphia. Now the Battle of Raphia, it says, "Battle of Raphia, also known as the Battle of Gaza, was fought on June 22nd, 217 BC near modern Rafah between the forces of Ptolemy IV, Philopater, king and pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt, and Antiochus III the Great of the Seleucid Empire during the Syrian Wars. It was one of the largest battles of the Hellenistic kingdoms and of the ancient world, and determined the sovereignty of Syria." Okay, so this is, again, this culminated the Fourth Syrian War. This battle here was won by, Ptolemy IV, actually. Okay, so it was a huge battle with many implications here. This is what we were going over last time as far as the war elephants and things of that nature. Now, where it says the multitude, let's look at the strength here, because over here in the Battle of Raphia, over in this portion, if you see my mouse here, it shows you the belligerents, or the two sides here, the Ptolemaic Egypt, Seleucid Empire, commanders and leaders. Ptolemy the fourth, and Antiochus the third. So if you look at the strength, this is the multitude that was mentioned. So Antiochus the third, he came in with 68,000, 62,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 102 war elephants. All right, and then on the Ptolemaic side, the king of the south, he came through 75,000 strong, 70,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, and 73 elephants. Okay, so this is the multitude that was given unto Ptolemy the fourth's hands. All right, so it says, shall come to fight. He shall set forth a great multitude. That's Antiochus deploying those 68,000 soldiers, including those 103 war elephants. Okay. Look like my number is off by 102 elephants. Excuse me. So that's that multitude that was given into Antiochus the fourth's hand because he won the battle. Okay. And if you look here in the history, this is the exact numbers that we see on the Wikipedia page. Okay, so let's look here. This is page 76. So it says, as soon as the spring begun, both parties again took the field, the Ptolemaic and the Seleucids. Ptolemy, that's Ptolemy the fourth, having gotten together an army of 70,000 foot, 5,000 horse, and 73 elephants. That's the same number that we got here. Okay, 70,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry or 5,000 foot, and then 73 elephants. Okay. Same exact number, 5,000 horse, 73 elephants. Yeah, match up. All right, ordered them to rendezvous at Pelusium, where putting himself at the head of them as soon as all we got ready for the march, he led them over the deserts that parted Egypt and Palestine. Okay, and by the way, a reason that you see Israel mentioned here, or this is relevant to Israel history, is because a lot of these wars were taking place, in quote unquote Palestine, over there close to Israel in a lot of our lands. And we were being impacted by all of this because we kept going under, essentially going under captivity of the Seleucids, and then the Ptolemy, they would take back over the Ptolemaic dynasty or the Ptolemaic kingdom at that time and then be switched back over. So we were going through it at this time for real. And encamped at Raphia, a town lying between Rhino Carrara and Gaza. And there Antiochus met him with an army little inferior to his. For he had 62,000 foot, 6,000 horse, and 102 elephants. And there he encamped first within 10 furlongs, and afterwards within 5 of the enemy. And while they lay thus near to each other, many bickerings, happened between parties, and they went out on each side either for watering or forage, and many bold adventures were made by particular persons from both armies. So this tells a story right here too, but that of Theodotus the Aetolian was the most remarkable. So he almost had the slip on Ptolemy. He actually used to be, he used to actually be with Ptolemy. Then he defected or went to the other side with Antiochus and the Seleucids, and he almost put an end to the war. He almost killed Ptolemy, but he mistook him. He thought he had his camp, but it really wasn't his. It really wasn't Ptolemy. It was his physician. Okay, that's what it's going into here. But not finding him there, he slew his chief physician instead of him, wounded 2 others, and he was able to make it back. So let's see here. What more do I want to get on this? The event of the battle was Antiochus commanding the right wing, routed the opposite wing of the enemy, but pursuing them too far. Point is, though, yeah, Ptolemy, they won. All right. The quote unquote Egyptians or the Ptolemaics, they won. On a retreat of Antiochus, see, like I was saying, he did return on the retreat of Antiochus because he lost. He had to flee. The cities of Cilicia and Palestine were at a strife, which of them should first yield themselves again to Ptolemy. Okay, so as you see, we were implicated here, whom ambassadors from the Jews who were all kindly received. Ptolemy, having thus regained these provinces, made a progress through them. And among other cities whom he visited, Jerusalem was one that had favor from him. So, yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep going in the actual chapter here. So I think we got most of that. Again, I am omitting a lot of history because I do just want to stick to what's listed here. But you got the book as a reference down, and you got the other links that we've looked at. So if you want to get more on it, just edify yourself even further. Okay, so that's that multitude in the battle of Raphia. All right, now this is where it's crazy. So verse 12, and when he had taken away the multitude, so when he had taken away the multitude, this is referring to the king of the south, because remember he won the battle of Raphia in the Fourth Syrian War. So when Ptolemy IV had taken away the multitude of Antiochus III, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. So this is referring to his heart shall be lifted up, is referring to how proud that Ptolemy got. Okay, after he became prideful after the defeat of Seleucus / Antiochus III. His heart was lifted up. Okay, let's read that. Let's read that here in our resources. Okay, so if we go down here to page 83, it says, in the interim, Philopater went on in his old course of life, giving himself wholly up to his lusts and voluptuous delights. What were his lusts? Let's see. Agathoclea, his concubine, and Agathocles, her brother, who was his catamite, governed him absolutely. So his catamite, this dude had a catamite. Now, what is that? We can find that in the scriptures. Let's get Matthew chapter 11 and verse 8. It says, but what went ye out for to see? This is Yahushua speaking, or Christ. A man clothed in soft raiment? Behold, they that wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. Okay. Not to get into what's actually going on here for the sake of time, but let's go down here to the concordance, or just the definition of the Greek word used here for soft, which is G3120, malakos. It says malakos. It says soft and effeminate. All right. Soft 3 times, effeminate once. The outline of biblical usage says soft to the touch, metaphor in a bad sense, effeminate. So this is a cut to these nowadays, or these modern folks that say that Yahushua never condemned quote unquote homosexuality. He did, of course. Of a catamite, it says of a boy kept for homosexual relationships or relations with a man. Of a catamite. So you see the same word being used here. So if we pull up what a catamite is, it says catamite. In ancient Greece and Rome, a catamite was a pubescent boy who was the intimate companion of an older male. usually in a pederastic relationship. So pederasty, as you see here highlighted on the screen, pederasty is a sexual relationship between an adult man and a boy. The term pederasty is primarily used to refer to historical practices. See, that's what you got to understand. These are not off events with pederasty and pedophilia. This is ritualistic in nature. It's a practice. Okay, it's spiritual to them. Refer to historical practices of certain cultures, particularly ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Of course. Of course. But like I said, ancient Egypt, they were not exempt of this either. But it was also used as a term of insult directed towards a grown man, hence why Yahushua said that. And the word derives from the proper noun catamitus, the Latinized form of Ganymede. Now, Ganymede, well, actually, it's just right here, the name of the beautiful Trojan Trojan youth abducted by Zeus to be his companion and cupbearer, according to Greek mythology. Remember, we're talking about the Greeks right now that worship, Zeus. So again, when you see these things, okay, let's see. Matter of fact, right here in its modern usage, the term catamite refers to a boy as a passive or receiving partner in anal intercourse with a man. Okay, and that's what Ptolemy IV was engaging in. He had his concubine's brother, what was a little boy, and was, messing around with him too. But this is very common. All right, so when you see these things in modern times, you have to understand this is not anything new. It's nothing new under the sun. They're not doing these things just because, they just have a sexual fetish. It's actually tied to the worship of the gods that they worship. Okay. All right. It's spiritual to them. I just actually saw this clip of Kevin Hart. Brothers and sisters may be familiar with it, where during one of his stand-ups, I'm not sure which one it was. I don't think it was recent, but it could have been, I'm not sure, where he was talking about a quote unquote pizza party. Any one of us that are, we hip to this is pizza and hot dogs that Hillary Clinton mentioned in her emails. A lot of times, well, not a lot of times, anytime you see that, they talking about a young boy or a young girl. Okay, this is ritualistic to them. And the gods that they worship, they also engage in pederasty. So if you worship, for example, if you worship the Most High, you're going to keep the feast days, you're going to keep the statute, laws, and commandments. If you worship Zeus, you find nothing wrong with a catamite because Zeus had Ganymede. Okay, he believed in quote unquote, pedophilia or the historical term of pederasty. So I just want, brothers and sisters to understand that. And that's really the end goal, to get to this. It's not homosexuality. Like a lot of times brothers will see one of these NBA players or something like that, they wearing, a dress or whatever the case. Look, that's not the end goal. Is to just make men effeminate. It's to make men and make, men and women go all ways, which they call pansexual. You'll get with an animal, you'll get with a little boy, a little girl, same sex, opposite sex, it don't matter, because these people do not believe in genders. Okay, that's a whole nother story, and I want to do an update to the agenda series too as well, to kind of talk about these things. But I just want brothers and sisters to truly understand that. But yeah, this dude, This dude was going off, man. Uh, so back here in the Old and New Testament connected, it says drinking, gaming, lasciviousness were the whole enjoyments of his life, referring to Ptolemy the Fourth. So drinking, he was on, drinking some hen. Gaming, he was on Xbox One. Lasciviousness, obviously I'm playing y'all, but lasciviousness were the whole enjoyments of his life. So after he won at the Battle of Raphia, dude just started kicking it, laying up with little boys and laying up with his sister and things of that nature. That's why it says here, his heart shall be lifted up. All right, and we're going to get to the cast down many 10,000s in a second, but he shall not be strengthened by it, because he wasn't strengthened by it. Really, if we look into history, if Ptolemy the Fourth, if he had kept going while Antiochus the Third and the Seleucid Empire was weak, he could have gained ground on them, man. Matter of fact, it's right here. It's right here. So it says, Antiochus, having thus made peace with Arsaces, carried the war in the next place against Euthydemus, king of Bactria. It hath been above related how Theodotus first usurped Bactria from the empire of the Syrian kings, and left it to his son of the same name. Him Euthydemus, having vanquished and driven out, reigned in his stead. And being a very valiant and wise prince, he maintained a long war against Antiochus in defense of the country which he had made himself master of, and everywhere made good his ground against him, so that Antiochus only wasted his army in his country without gaining any advantage by it. So, Ptolemy the Fourth, he did not take advantage of winning that war against the Seleucid Empire. Yeah, he didn't take advantage. That's why it says here, he shall not be strengthened by it. And he shall cast down many 10,000s. So if we look here in the Battle of Raphia, if we look at the casualty and losses, on the Seleucid side, it was 14,000 lost, but he also cast down about 40,000 Israelites. Okay, so that's why it says many 10,000s. Okay, we can get that here around page 83 too as well. Let's see. Actually, it's on page 82. It says, about this time, the discontents of the Egyptians against Philopater, which I have above mentioned, broke out into a civil war. Polybius, which is another historian, tells us that there was such a war, but neither he nor any other author gives us any account of the event of it. But Philopater, still retaining his royal dignity and power without any diminution of either, this sufficiently proves that he mastered this difficulty, which side the Jews, who now made a considerable part of the bulk of the people of Egypt, because we were scattered there at this time already, took in this war is not said, but it seems most likely that there were of that party which came by the worst. For Eusebius tells us, another historian, that about this time 40,000 of them were cut off and destroyed. 40,000 cut off and destroyed. That's why it says that he shall cast down many 10,000s. All right. So he was a murderous, lasciviousness into behind king, man. All right. But that's pretty much it on verse 12. Let's get verse 13. It says, for the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. So for the king of the south, for the king of the north shall return is referring to Antiochus the Third. So he did return after his defeat at the battle of Raphia, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former. So in the time between the time that he lost at the battle of Raphia, which I believe we put on screen, right? I think I did put that on screen, how he did lose at the battle of Raphia. Between the time that he lost at the battle of Raphia, it says, okay, the campaigns at 219 BC and 218 BC carried the Seleucid armies almost to the confines of the Ptolemaic kingdom, but in 217 BC, Ptolemy IV defeated Antiochus at the battle of Raphia. So from the time of the battle of Raphia, from the time of the next battle that was waged against the Ptolemaic kingdom, or the next Ptolemy, was going to be the battle of Paneum. So at the battle of Paneum, if we see here, so first just to go over this, it says the battle of Paneum, which is interesting. We're going to see where this comes from, the battle of Paneum, also known as Panion or Paneas. Sound familiar? Was fought in 200 BC near Paneas or Caesarea Philippi. I know brothers and sisters have seen this location in the quote-unquote New Testament. We'll get in a second. Between Seleucid and Ptolemaic forces as part of the Fifth Syrian War. The Seleucids were led by Antiochus III the Great, while the Ptolemaic army was led by Scopas of Aetolia. He was the general there. The Seleucids achieved a complete victory, annihilating the Ptolemaic army and conquering the province of Celesyria. The Ptolemaic kingdom never recovered from its defeat at Paneum and ceased to be an independent great power. Antiochus secured his southern flank and began to concentrate on the looming conflict with the Roman Republic. So this was the next battle that they waged in the Fifth Syrian War. Okay. This is the Battle of Paneum. Now, this is the spring of Aeneas with the cave of Pan in the background. Pan is one of the quote-unquote gods that I've covered in previous lessons. It's a god that's still worshipped today. Okay. I could go more into it, but I'll leave that alone for now. So where it says that he came with a multitude greater, if you see here on the Seleucid side, Antiochus III, he came with 70,000 men this time. Now in the Battle of Raphia, he came with 68,000. Yeah, that's a 2,000 difference, but it's more to it than that, because what I was going into earlier, at the time, between the time of these two battles, you actually had Antiochus III engaging in many other conquests too as well, strengthening his army. Okay. So while Ptolemy IV was around there being wicked, and not saying that Antiochus III wasn't wicked, but just saying while he was around there just chilling and quote unquote living his best life, you actually had Antiochus III engaging in the Bactrian campaign and Indian expedition and strengthening up his army. So by the time he came back to fight the Ptolemies, he was already strengthened. Okay. And that's why I said that he gained with much riches. It came from those conquests in those times. Okay. And that's why he came with a great army. I think I got that in notes here too. Yeah. So Ptolemy didn't take advantage of his win, as he could have taken the entire remaining kingdom of the Seleucids. Yeah. If Ptolemy would have kept pressing and not would have sat back playing Xbox like he did, he probably would have been able to take over the kingdom of the Seleucids while they were weak at the Battle of Raphia. But he was more interested in being drunken and lasciviousness. Okay. Now, Yeah, I have here on the notes, Antiochus III, we went over that. Returned. Antiochus III was building up his army and strength from other conquests. He came with a greater army at the Battle of Panium, with a larger army than the army at the Battle of Raphia, excuse me. There, it says much riches. He accumulated those riches from the conquest of Parthia. Okay, and we can go deeper into that, but that's pretty much the gist of it. That's good enough for sure to cover. If you want more edification, just read more on some of the things already listed, and you'll be able to see it. Okay, this is verse 14. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. So this is getting closer to the time, or it is around the time that Ptolemy the Fourth, Philopater, actually died. It says mysterious circumstances, but from the stuff he was doing, man, he probably died from HIV. He probably had AIDS or something, COVID BC. Man was probably out there sick, man. He probably had every STD ever mentioned. He probably started them up or something. I was saying that about Alexander the Freak, but this dude really got down. So it says, in those times, men shall stand up against the king of the south. So you did have Antiochus III and Philip the Fifth of Macedon. They made a pact to divide Ptolemaic possessions. So they standing up against the king of the south. Okay, we got that in the history here. If we scroll down here, and remember, the Macedonians are just Greeks as well, just in a different part here, but they're all Edomites, by the way. Okay, and also you had too, at the time, let's see, upon his death in the regency, but the follower of contrivance being easily seen through first provoked the laughter. Matter of fact, if we go up, so actually you seen, it had not been long returned to Antioch, he had an account of the death of Ptolemy Philopater, king of Egypt. This prince, having worn out a very strong body by his intemperance and debaucheries, ended his life, as it usually happens to others in this case, before he had lived out half its course. Yeah, of course, he was kicking it too hard. Nobody like that can live to see 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90 or nothing. He was very little above 20 when he first came to the throne, and he sat on it only 17 years. After him succeeded Ptolemy Epiphanes, his son, a child of 5 years only. None but Agathocles and Agathoclea and their creatures being about him at the time of his death, they concealed it as long as they could, and in the interim plundered the palace all the treasure and riches there left by the deceased king, that they could lay their hands upon. So this is what we're reading about here, where it says in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Okay, these are those standing up against the king of the south, because we see that Ptolemy the Fourth, he just died, and then you had his concubine, and sadly to say, that catamite of his, they savaged in the place for all the gold and everything, and they was trying to hide that he was dead. There was some more, it was some more nonsense with that too, but I did want to get to, let's get to this part here. Antiochus, king of Syria, and Philip, king of Macedon, thinking to serve themselves of the advantage they had by the death of Philopater and the succession of an infant king after him, entered into a league to divide his dominions between them, agreeing that Philip should have Caria, Libya, Cyrene, and Egypt, and Antiochus all the rest. And accordingly, Antiochus forthwith marched into Cilicia and Palestine, and partly this year and partly in the next, made himself master of those provinces and all the several districts and cities in them. So that's that pact between Philip the fifth, king of Macedon, Antiochus. They made a pact to divide the territories of the king of the south. And it says, also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So the robbers of thy people is actually referring to the Israelites. Okay. Let's get a little bit here. A little bit of the breakdown here. Also, robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish a vision. It says here in this commentary here, it says, and respects the Jews of his countrymen, and at least some of them, refractory persons that broke through all laws of the Most High men, seditious men, disturbers of the public peace, and who lived upon the spoil and plunder of others. These either took the advantage of the disturbances in Egypt and went thither and plundered what they could. So that's why it says the robbers of thy people, in a bold and audacious manner, and so helped to fulfill this prophecy, or during the troubles in their own land, through the kings of Egypt and Syria, took the opportunity of committing thefts and robberies in a very daring manner, whereby they brought upon them those evils thread in the law to such persons. And particularly when the Egyptians prevailed, they sided with them against Antiochus, especially such who apostatized from their religion to please the king of Egypt, but were afterwards punished by Antiochus. But it follows, but they shall fall, be cut off and destroyed, as those apostates that were of Ptolemy's party were by Antiochus when he invaded Judea and became master of Jerusalem. 3 Maccabees chapter 1. Some understand this of the apostate Jews who fled with Onias, the high priest to Egypt, and were there honorably received by Ptolemy, and obtained leave to build a temple there under the pretense of fulfilling the vision of prophecy of Daniel 19:19, which says, let's go to the, hold on, ma. I'm just trying to go to it real quick, all these translations. Okay. So it says, Isaiah 19:19, in the day there shall be an altar to the Most High in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Most High. So you had robbers of thy people. All right, you have our people rebelling and they failed. Okay, trying to establish the vision or trying to fulfill prophecy on their own account. Okay, that also is rising up against the king of the south. All right. So now we got, and I believe I got that on the notes too as well. Yep. All right, now we can get verse 15. All right, verse 15. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. So the king of the south shall come and cast up a mount. So this is not the battle of Raphia. This is the battle of Panium. The king of the north is Antiochus III. Casts up a mount. Let's change that real quick. Cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities. Antiochus conquered Batanea, Samaria, and other fenced cities in Israel. All right, so when you read this here, the fenced cities, you have to understand that we always have fenced cities. Always. As a matter of fact, And when I say us in Israel, we have fenced cities. Let's get there real quick. Let's get that in 2nd Chronicles chapter 11. It says, Rehoboam reigns over Judah and builds cities. 2nd Chronicles 11:1. And when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he gathered of the house of Judah and Benjamin 180,000 chosen men, which were warriors to fight against Israel, that he might bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam. Okay, let's skip down here. It says, verse 5, and Rehoboam dwelt in Jerusalem and built cities for defense in Judah. And lists all the cities. It says in verse 10, Azarah and Ajalon and Hebron, which are in Judah and Benjamin, fenced cities. And he fortified the strongholds and put captains in them, in store of victual and of oil and wine. So we always have fenced cities. So what that means is you have super high walls, so that if anybody was to come and try to lay a siege on Israel, it would be protected. You can read about that a lot too in the quote unquote Jewish Roman War that took place in 66 AD to 70 AD or so. The Romans that came and took the fenced cities at that time too, and we have fenced cities, which was crazy though, because also mentions here the store of victual and of oil and wine. So you actually had the zealots that, to go back a little further there, when it says victuals as in food. So just in case there was a siege, if someone tried to take over the city, we had a bunch of food stored, and store of victuals. So that's what that means. But the zealots, at least I'm talking about the quote unquote Roman and Jewish war right now. The zealots, they actually took the food and was throwing it over the wall. They was getting rid of the food to try to incite the people to fight. But what really cost us, it cost us rather. It really cost us for sure. I think, I got that pulled up. The siege of Jerusalem. Okay, the siege of Jerusalem is 70 CE, was a decisive event of the First Jewish-Roman War. And I think it's going to talk about the zealots here in the siege. So despite early successes in repelling the Roman sieges, the zealots fought amongst themselves and they lacked proper leadership, resulting. And at one point, they destroyed the food stocks in the city, a drastic measure thought to have been undertaken perhaps in order to enlist a merciful God's intervention on behalf of the besieged Jews, or as a stratagem to make the defenders more desperate, supposing that was necessary in order to repel the Roman army. So that's why they did it. The zealots, or the also the Sicarii, our people during the Roman in quote unquote Roman and Jewish war. They actually got rid of the food stocks that we had, but that's not completely relevant to what's going on here in the Battle of Panium. But just wanted to show examples that we did have fenced cities made for defense, and they had been there before even we got there and conquered. If you look back, I believe in the book of Numbers, you would see that when the children of Israel were scouting the land, the Holy Land, they saw the high towers and the fenced cities, and that's one thing that scared them to get that bad report. But anyway, that's what it means by the most fenced cities, because Antiochus III, he did take the most fenced cities. And the Battle of Panium, by the way, this is close, or this is pretty much in Israel. Okay. So this is in Israel, or quote unquote, in quote unquote Palestine. All right. So again, we were implicated here. Our people were. So this is the major war. Again, I could go further into it, but I've read all of this, but at the same time, I do want to keep it as tight as possible. All right, so about to get that in just a second. Now, what else? In the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. So here it says aftermath after the battle of Panium. Scopus led 10,000 men to seek refuge at Sidon. Other Ptolemaic contingents fled to Jerusalem, Phoenicia, Samaria, and Decapolis. All of them were forced to surrender by the end of 198 BC. Cilicia came under Seleucid control, and the Ptolemies were compelled to sign a peace treaty with Antiochus in 195 BC. As one of the battle results, the Ptolemaic state was forced to scale down the role of Macedonian settler phalanx in the years that followed. Some biblical commentators see this battle as being the one referred to in Daniel 11:15, where it says, "Then the king of the north shall come up and build up siege ramps and capture a fortified city." Okay? That's why it says that. It says some biblical commentators. This is exactly what is being referred to here. All right, act like they don't know. Or it's just like an opinion. But it says cast up a mount. So obviously what that means there is that Antiochus III, he came through in a mount. Or what we would call today like a cover. Okay, I pulled this up, mount or mound in this case, hedge, fence, also an embankment, a dam, a sense probably influenced by mount. Word of obscure origin, the relationship between the noun and the verb is uncertain. So a mound is anything enclosing a fence or enclosing a fortified with an embankment. So he had himself enclosed off with a mound. All right, that was one of his strategies that he used to take the fenced cities that we talked about here. All right, let's go back to the notes. All right. In the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. So Antiochus defeated the Ptolemaic army. Remember, Ptolemy, he won the battle of Ramphia. Well, now Antiochus, he won this battle. And anyone that tried to resist, Scopus fled to Sidon, but eventually had to surrender. And also, where it says neither his chosen people. So we stood up against him too as well, neither his chosen people. But there was no strength to withstand, meaning everything failed. Okay. We also can read about this in the history too as well. And so we could read about this in the history as well, but we'll keep moving forward. It says in verse 16, "But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land. By his hand shall he be consumed." Now the children of Israel welcomed Antiochus III with open hands once he conquered and recaptured Jerusalem. Okay, so when it says that, "But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will," that he that cometh against the king of the south shall do according to his own will, referring to Antiochus III, and none shall stand before him. He shall stand in the glorious land, okay, in Israel, or Jerusalem more specifically, which by his hand shall be consumed. Okay, now let's get that in the history here of Josephus. So it says in chapter 3 here, and Josephus is writing, it says, "The Jews also obtained honors from the king of Asia when they became their auxiliaries. For Seleucus Nicator made them citizens in those cities which he built in Asia." Okay, let's get down to Antiochus III. It says, "Now it happened that in the reign of Antiochus III, who ruled over all Asia, that the Jews, as well as the inhabitants of Cilicia, suffered greatly, and their land was sorely harassed. For while he was at war with Ptolemy Eupator, or Philopater, which is Ptolemy IV, and with his son, who was called Epiphanes, it fell out that these nations were equally sufferers, both when he was beaten and when he beat the others, so that they were very like to a ship in a storm, which is tossed by the waves on both sides. And just thus were they in their situation in the middle between Antiochus' posterity and its change to adversity. But at length, when Antiochus had beaten Ptolemy, he seized upon Judea. And when Philopater was dead, his son sent out a great army under Scopas, the general of his forces, against the inhabitants of Cilicia, who took many of their cities, and in particular our nation. So who took many cities? We just read about that in verse 15. It took most of the fenced cities. Okay, and this is going down near Jerusalem, all right, in the Battle of Panium. So, a particular our nation, when he fell upon them, went over to him. Yet it was not long afterwards when Antiochus in a battle fought in the fountains of Jordan, this is Battle of Panium, and destroyed a great part of his army. But afterwards, when Antiochus subdued those cities in Cilicia, when Scopas had gotten into his possession, and Samaria with them, the Jews of their own accord went over to him and received him into the city of Jerusalem, and gave plenty provision to all his army and to his elephants, and readily assisted when he besieged the garrison which was in the citadel of Jerusalem. So they welcomed this captivity. They welcomed this oppression from Antiochus III with open hands. Okay. Wherefore Antiochus thought it but just to requite the Jews' diligence and zeal in his service. So he wrote to the generals of his armies and to his friends, and gave testimony to the good behavior of the Jews towards him, and informed them what rewards he had resolved to bestow on them for that their behavior. I will set down presently the epistles themselves, which he wrote to the generals concerning them, but will produce the testimony of Polybius of Megalopolis, for thus does he speak in the 16th book of his history. So we won't go into that letter, but that's what it means, that none will withstand, but also none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land of Jerusalem, which by his hand shall be consumed, because it's going to be consumed. Okay. And again, when he came and took over Judea, nobody stopped him. Nobody tried to stop him. I read one account that said he was even seen as a savior, due to the fact that actually Scopas of the Ptolemaic side, they just got through oppressing Israel just the year before. And because of that, they were vulnerable pretty much. All right. And they seen Antiochus as a formidable leader. All right. And gave him favor. But anyway, all right. So this is, if you want to go to this in the history, this is page 87 about the Battle of Panium, or at Panius, near the fountains of the river Jordan. He was there overthrown with a great slaughter and forced to flee Sidon. That's what we were reading. Okay. They're being shut down with 10,000 of his own men. All right. And this is the fenced cities that he took, by the way. He being Antiochus III. And let's keep going. So the Jews were at this time very much alienated in their affections from the Egyptian king, whether were by reason of the former ill treatment of their nation by his father, or for some fresher ill usage they had received, is not said. It is most likely it was because of the ravages and robberies of Scopas on his taking Jerusalem the former year, for he was very covetous and rapacious man, laying his hands everywhere on all that he could get. And therefore, on Antiochus' marching that way, they willingly rendered all places unto him. And on his coming to Jerusalem, the priests and elders went out in a solemn procession to meet him, and received him with gladness, and entertained him with all his army in their city, provided for his horses and elephants, and assisted him with their arms for the reducing of the castle where Scopas had left a garrison. So we welcomed him in, unfortunately, but who am I to say? I would have been there probably doing the exact same thing. This is just history. Okay. Now we can go to verse 17. It says, he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her. But she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. So now, where it says, he shall also set his face to enter. So Antiochus, he was getting ready to enter Egypt again. So now that you have the Ptolemaic kingdom being weakened again, he sought to expand after conquering Jerusalem. He already conquered that. He was setting his sights on Egypt. Okay, so where it says he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, with the whole strength of the Seleucids. He was talking about, Seleucus is talking about Egypt here. And the upright ones with him. So Jews were with Antiochus. due to his favors Antiochus bestowed upon them. Okay, so where it says the upright ones, it's talking about the children of Israel that was with him, helping him go and conquer Egypt. All right, now it says, and he shall give him a daughter of women. Antiochus offered his daughter Cleopatra to Ptolemy Epiphanes. So the upright ones, the Jews were Antiochus, and it says he shall give him a daughter of women. Antiochus offered his daughter Cleopatra to Ptolemy Epiphanes. So remember Ptolemy the fourth, that's the one I was going crazy off. And he had a son that was only 5 years old at the time that Ptolemy the fourth died, Ptolemy Epiphanes, or Ptolemy the fifth. Ptolemy the fifth at this time was only around 12, I believe, but Antiochus offered his daughter Cleopatra when he was of age. So I believe 4 years later, they got married. Cleopatra, which is the daughter of Antiochus III, the daughter of women here that's being mentioned, corrupting her. All right, he was corrupting her because he was really using Cleopatra to, it was supposed to be a deception there, kind of like a Trojan horse to get in good with Egypt so you can go and conquer them. But it says, but she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. So Cleopatra was supposed to be used as a tool to subject Egypt or Ptolemy Epiphanes, but she took the side of her husband. So she actually didn't do exactly what Antiochus III thought she was going to do. Okay. So she took the side of the Romans. Okay. And she did not take the side of her father. She actually stopped a siege. Let's get Cleopatra real quick. So Cleopatra, the first Syria, was a princess of the Seleucid Empire, or the daughter of women mentioned here in Daniel chapter 11 and in verse 17. So in marriage of Ptolemy V of Egypt, region of Egypt, during a minority of their son Ptolemy VI from her husband's death, in 180 BC into her own death in 176 BC. Okay. Cleopatra I was the daughter of Antiochus III the Great, king of the Seleucid Empire, and Queen Laodice III. All right, so let's get this part where it says, let's see. Let's just keep reading. In Alexandria, Cleopatra I was referred to as the Syrian. As part of the Ptolemaic cult, she was honored with her husband as Theoa Epiphanes, in line with ancient Egyptian traditions of sibling marriage. She was also named sister of Ptolemy V, of course. A synod of priests held at Memphis, Egypt, in 185 BC granted Cleopatra all the honors that had been given to Ptolemy V in 196 BC, inscribed on the bilingual Greek-Egyptian Rosetta Stone. So it's found on the Rosetta Stone, that many of us are probably familiar with the Rosetta Stone program to teach languages. This is where the Rosetta Stone actually is. A stele composed of granodiorites inscribed with 3 versions of a decree issued in Memphis, Egypt. Okay. So it says Ptolemy V died unexpectedly September 180 BC at the age of only 30. Cleopatra, the first son, Ptolemy VI, who was only 6 years old, was immediately crowned king, with Cleopatra as co-regent. She was the first Ptolemaic queen to rule without her husband. Okay. Just before his death, Ptolemy V had been planning a new war against the Seleucid kingdom. But Cleopatra immediately ended war preparations and pursued a peaceful policy because of her own Seleucid roots and because a war would have threatened her hold on power. Okay. So she actually didn't stand for the Seleucids. So that's pretty much all I want to get there. All right, that's the daughter of women being mentioned here. So now we got verse 18, and we're getting ready to wrap this up. Matter of fact, we're getting ready to wrap this up. Matter of fact, let's go into 18 the next time. I think we got enough here. So this is, again, most of the exploits of Antiochus III. All right, and Ptolemy IV, and now Ptolemy V. We could talk a little bit more about the wedding engagement of Cleopatra here. But I think we pretty much saw all the history here. Yeah, I think we pretty much got it. Yeah, we pretty much got it. We're going to talk more about the Romans next time too as well, because like I said, they're slowly gaining power at this time. They're getting close to, well, when I say close, at least within 100 years or so of being in rulership themselves. But they raging wars and things of that nature right now during this time period. But yeah, that is pretty much it. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. I tried to keep it as brief as possible, but there's a lot of things I did omit. And if you saw something that I omitted that you want to add, just, feel free to do so. And that's pretty much it. Into the next part, we will cover Antiochus Epiphanes, who's mentioned in 1 Maccabees chapter 1. We'll finish out Antiochus III here in Daniel chapter 11. But with that, I bid everyone a mighty shalom.